grateful that you came out to this talk, especially when it's so thundery and tempestuous outside. So I hope we have an oasis of calm in here and an interesting discussion. This book was a channeled book, and it was a book that I really had no choice in writing. It came through very forcefully, and every time I tried to do something else, things withered away. So I was getting, I was in a conventional job as a management consultant, and I wore very expensive suits that were tailor cut. And I liked it very much, this life, because I was kind of quite a queen, quite a madam with it. But it finished when there was a new change in government, and it was a real niche market. It was community capacity building, and it just went overnight. And I trained to be a healer, and when I was doing a meditation, I was lucky enough to see my angel in a way that I could accept her. Because I had been channeling, I'd been being approached by my angel for quite a long time, and I was too terrified to admit her. It was too scary for me. And then what happened was I started to write automatically, and she was saying to me things like, "Dearest one, you must write your book. It's needed to help with the great shift." And tonight, I suppose the book covers many dimensions. It has the story of that transition that I made, which was a big transition that I'm hoping will give courage to anyone else who's making the transition. It has the story of immanence and how we are trying to become immanent and walk in grace. It has various stories. It has lots of funny stories about synchronicity. But the main thing in the book is really about the great shift, I feel. In 2012, we were all expecting the world. We didn't know what was going to happen in our community. It was just like, okay, 2012, it's going to be the end of the world, you know, the end of the Mayan calendar. What's going to happen now? So what's going to happen? From what my information is, she kept saying to me, it's the integration of the material and the spiritual. And I started to look at it in terms of what I learned when I was training to be a healer. And when I was trained to be a healer, they were talking to me about the chakras. Now, can I just check, does everybody here, you've heard the term chakra? Yeah, fantastic audience, that's so cool. And you know how to collect your own chi? Have you done that? Yeah, you know how to do it? So the 7 chakras, my understanding is that here we are, we're standing on top of the earth, each person as a manifestation of divinity, with stardust within us, each person a miracle, and that we make manifest the divine, the material, and the way that we do it is it travels like a little mini production line through the chakras. So, does that make sense? Do you know how? So the book's talking about that. So the way it happens is, like, for example, the affirmation of the first chakra is inspiration. It's the right to be in spirit. So if, for example, I was writing the book, it's like, aha, Spirit is telling me to write a book. I've had an inspiration. So that's come into this part. And then you start thinking about it. The affirmation of the brow chakra is the right to see and understand the truth. Now, I don't know if anyone here has been doing channeling. I mean, it's kind of hard, the dimension we work in sometimes, because you think you might be seen as strange that you can hear an angel. Not everybody does it, or they don't admit to it. You don't really often have many people saying, I have a feeling or I have an intuition. We're taught not to. So sometimes it doesn't even get any further, the progress of this work. It can stop here and you can kind of throw it out. If it's going to go through the production line, it comes down to the throat, and the affirmation of the throat is the right to hear and speak the truth. It's about authenticity, yeah? So it's got to be real. You can't pretend that you're channeling something. You have to make it genuine. Yeah, it's no good. You can't be thinking, and sometimes people are like, oh, okay, is it genuine? You know, we doubt ourselves, and that happened to me. I was like, is this genuine? But it seems to be. People are saying it's genuine. So then, if it then continues down the production line, and this, the 4th chakra, I think, is the most important one, because it's between heaven and earth. The top 3 chakras are connecting us to heaven, and the bottom 3 are to earth. And the heart, the affirmation for the heart is the right to give and receive love. and it's very special. You have to love what you're doing, and the giving and the receiving is a balance of grace, really. So if someone kisses you, who gets the benefit of the kiss? The person who gives the kiss or the person who receives the kiss? It's a whole area of magic. So if it's going to be a good project and it continues through, it can start to become made manifest. Then it becomes material, because it goes down into the solar, which is a hard hitting chakra, which is the right to act. And one needs to have been affirmed as a child, or has done work as an adult to think, okay, I have the right to write this book. It's not going to be dribble, you know. It's valid. It's a good book. Okay, so then the whole process continues. It comes to the sacral, and that's about emotion, energy, emotion, which is governed by the moon. So it's held in the strong bowl of the pelvis because of the fluidity. That one minute you might think, oh, I'm great. Next minute you think, oh no, I'm not so great. So the book progresses if it goes through there. So that's the right to give and receive pleasure. You've got to enjoy what you're doing, and then it's born. It's the right to be here. The final act is, here is the book. You know, here's the production, and anything in this shop goes through that process, because it's from an idea, any piece of cloth, and it's amazing. I think it's absolutely astonishing. The great shift, I think, refers to the fact that there used to be a greater division, and so here above this chakra, it would be that there are priests and priestesses who would be accessing the divine, and maybe they'd be kept more of aside. Maybe they would be on a mountaintop. It would be that they weren't in the workplace of actually making. They would be out of it. You know, if it was a rabbi or a priest, it would be more cerebral, and the people would be feeding that person. You know, here's the bread in return for the blessing, literally. I think the challenge of our age, and the challenge that I'm talking about in the book, is that to make manifest the divine and to behave, to be in a spiritual way, is that now we're putting the spiritual in the marketplace by saying every act is a holy act, so that we're kind of we're hoping to slow down to that, so that if you make bread, you realise it is holy. I just went and had coffee with my son Josh, who's at the back there, and he was like, no, we're not going to that coffee shop, we're going to this coffee shop, because they here's the coffee and they distill it, and it's all done in a very perfect way with a great deal of care, so that cup of coffee becomes a holy cup of coffee. And the thing about it is that in here I'm talking about how some of the challenges in doing that, because the division used to serve me very well, because I could be very rational and not be spiritual, and it served me to suddenly stand up and say, well, actually I'm going to be a spiritual person, and here I am, was one of the most difficult things I ever did. And I have lots of stories, like funny stories, about things happening. Like once I was asked to give a talk, and I was terrified because it's going to be on YouTube, and I hadn't made any preparation, so I said to my angel, well, you can do it for me then, because I am too scared and I'm just going to get out of the way for this. And I forgot to take my mobile out of my pocket, and so I went and talked like this for a while, and then when I'd finished the talk, the energy had impacted on the mobile, so it wouldn't take any phone calls. I couldn't make any phone calls. In fact, I was at your house and it started hopping. It hopped around and put it down. It was like, so when you're kind of dealing with these energies, now I haven't got my mobile with me, it's in my bag over there. So it's like a work in progress. I've had to learn with all of this. And so because of the learning, I have to say I'm a very naive and almost skeptical person in this journey, because all the time I want to verify the angel. Is this right? What's happening here? So I had experiences like, for example, when I was in a time of great pain, my ex-husband, he had just become very ill, and my family had disowned me, and I was really struggling, and I'm Jewish, right? But suddenly I was driving my car and it was in the snow, and the radio started to play Silent Night on its own. and it was the most beautiful heavenly choir, and I didn't know what was going on. I stopped the car and I was going round the car and going, okay, and I got back in and it was just the choir, and it was just come in, and it came from the radio, which was very helpful, because otherwise I would have been going, oh no, you know what's going on, but it comforted me. And I still am getting messages that comfort me. So I suppose this book is also about the right to be observant in terms of the messages as we walk as a shaman. So the latest thing that happened to me in terms of the message was that on Midsummer's Day I was here and I did lots of readings, and my chakra was open, my crown chakra was open, and I forgot to close it, and I went off to a picnic. And then I didn't stop talking, and I know I've got permission to talk now, but there really I was just kind of going on, and I realised that I hadn't stopped talking, and I should have done. There was a point at which I overstepped a mark, and I should have just been quiet. And I was thinking about it on the way home, and then suddenly I heard like this clanking behind the car, and it was like clank, clank, clank. I was like, okay, clank, 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 and I drove the car off the road, and I'm always protected. The spiritual journey, you're always protected. So immediately I stopped, and I'm looking underneath the car. Some man comes out of nowhere, and you know, radiant man. He says, well, I'm in charity work. He's like an angel, like an earth angel. And he looks under the car and he says, oh, it's your silencer. And so that he pulls out he pulls out this huge lump of engine, and he says, I go, oh, that's my silencer. And so he just puts it in my boot, and I go, well, don't I have to call anyone, like anyone? He says, no, you could drive to China if you like, your silencer's not essential. So I just go in, I get inside, I buy a cup of coffee, and I get in the car, I drive home, and I'm like laughing all the way down the motorway because my silencer is finally there. And I think, well, you know what, Wendy, you just got to swallow that silencer and just learn occasionally to just shut up. And anyway, is it time now? Does anyone have questions? Have I rattled on enough? Do you want to move into questions? Or yes?
So was that a moment of synchronicity?
I would think so. Well, it was either a moment of synchronicity or like my guides actually saying, listen, you, for once, just listen, and take note.
How do you know? Is it words?
That's always the question, is it how do we know? Lots of people come and say, how do I know? And it's a very good question. Sometimes people feel invaded. I was just having coffee with someone who said to me, oh my goodness, sometimes in London I hear voices, it's very spiritual, I hear people speaking and I don't want to hear them. For me, I have an inner knowing. That was very funny, because all the way I was kind of hitting myself in terms of self-flagellation, thinking, oh, for God's sake, Wendy, well, sorry, you know, why didn't you just be quiet on that occasion? And then suddenly, like, there's the humour of it. So then that happens like that, and I know it's just so apt, and I can't stop laughing, and then I kind of feel a lift, and so that I know I've absorbed it and learnt the lesson. Yeah? But it's my inner knowing. How else could I know? Yes? Well, with me, what happened, I didn't want to hear my angel, because I think I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. I'm meant to be on earth being human, and there's a lot to do here. I didn't really want. Josh was having dreams that the angel was knocking at the door and saying, come and speak to me. But I was so terrified. You have to get to an age, really, that you can actually face your guardian. And I didn't believe I was contacting her until I had my star chart read, and they said I had the capacity to contact her. And now I can do it at will. I can literally just tune in. So I just raise my frequency like a radio station, just like zooming up, and I catch her. I'm lucky, but other people do it in different ways. My friend does it, she's a singer, and she came to me and she said to me, oh, Wendy, I want you to help me because I really want to contact my angel and I'm not. And so I channeled, and my angel said, when she sings in the choir, her angels are completely present and they're communicating with her through the singing, through her talent. So even if you're a gardener and that's your talent, when you're there gardening, in that moment of peace, they can come. Yeah? Any more questions? Because there are angels in Judaism, and it's not really spoken about. And I write about it here because one day I went into a chemist to sell some candles, and there was a Jewish lady there, and she said, well, we have angels, and she told me about the angel Raphael. And I went and looked up the story of Raphael, who walked with Tobias, and it's a very, very lovely story. I don't find it clashes for me, because my angel is always saying to make manifest the divine. And to embody it, and in Judaism, it's two of the tenets. I'm not an expert, I'm quite. It's to say Tika Alam, repair the world, and then the Hasidim is to dance in the delight of the world, and it's almost like. So my friend, who is a rabbi's daughter, she said you're meant to taste all the delights of the earth, and eat it, and if you don't, you have to come back and do it again. Yeah, and she's like 70 or 80, and she's like, just the whole thing about being joyous, and it is joyous because every leaf on every tree is different, and you can feel the chi energy of anything that's alive, like the crystals here. Even my book, I'm not plugging my book has a huge charge, but then I have a lot of energy. But if you rub your hand, but some of these do, you can douse for them. It's great because we need a friend. And I think for the angel, like with Tobias, his angel walked alongside him, Raphael. It's like the higher level, that when you're a really good friend, and I try and do this, but sometimes I fail miserably, as you can imagine, because I'm impulsive, but the whole thing about walking alongside someone, the song, don't walk in front of me, I may not follow, don't walk behind me, I may not lead, just walk beside me and be my friend. I think that's what our angels are doing. They want to walk beside us, and so that's why there's the whole thing about having to ask them if you want some help, because otherwise sometimes it's very lonely on earth. We come to rectify ourselves, to grow, and sometimes ultimately we feel we're so alone. So I think they're there to be a companion and to help with a great shift, to raise the vibration that we're going through, so that we're more kind, more loving, and the experience of being on earth is denser and richer for us. That's what I think. Whether or not I'm right, I don't know, but that's what I think. Yes, hi, sorry.
Is there just one particular angel that's dedicated to us, or can there be a number of them?
I'm not sure, actually. Different people I speak to have different experiences. I have it with one, but other people tell me that in different times of their life they've had different ones. I don't know, does anyone here in the audience have any experience of that with a Ursula? Did you want to say something?
Well, I have definitely what I call
Personally connect to things. So what is your talent? And it's like the thing about the inspiration, and that everybody is different and we're all divine, and we're meant to be finding ourselves to be shining our maximum potential. So what is your talent? What do you like? If you like to paint, or what do you like to do? Or if you like to write, what do you like to do? You like to write, yeah. So through writing comes then. That's the easiest way. There's no reason you couldn't get it another way. Through walking, nature is a good way, to connect. Or people go into a temple or into church and go with others. There's different ways. I think, yeah. Did you want me to read a little bit from the book about synchronicity? Would that be boring to you? Yeah. In December 2014, I was standing in a Jewish bakery in Edgware. Can everyone hear this? Are you okay? And the woman next to me brought one mince pie. It struck me as funny, so I laughed. "Why are you laughing at me?" she said. "I'm not laughing at you, laughing with you, because it seems to be incongruous to be buying a mince pie in a Jewish bakery, especially at this time of year." It was the week of the Jewish festival Hanukkah, and about to be the Christian festive holidays too. "But mince pies taste good," she said. "Even though I do agree with you, it does seem incongruous, doesn't it?" We both laughed. In fact, actually, she was facing me off. She's like, "Oh, who are you? Why are you querying me having a mince pie?" But anyway, we toned it down slightly because we had to. Outside of the store, I then asked her if she lived locally, as I was new in Edgware. She said yes. She had recently moved into the area about 18 months ago, returning to London from overseas only a few years before. I asked her what her name was, and she said, "I'm Lee Curtis." "What do you do?" I said. She told me she was a writer and a magazine's editor, and she mentors writers. Just like that, I found myself an editor for this book and a writing coach. One of Leah's strengths is editorial strategic intervention. In our first meeting, within a week, she formulated a new strategy for this book. Before my eyes, it became clear how this book would be structured, and she made it very clear that what she felt I needed to do to create a coherent, compelling, informative story for the intelligent and inquisitive reader. Well, that's a polite way of saying that she actually tore it up in about 1,000 pieces and threw it at me, made me go away and redo it 6 times. But anyway, I did, and she was very exacting, and she made it my work. So then we began our work together straight away with a schedule in place for weekly editorial status meetings. I was on my way. If I had timed my visit to the bakery 5 minutes either way, I would have missed meeting Leah Cotis altogether. She rarely goes out and about shopping, so focused is she on her current schedule of writing and studying. But that day she popped out for 5 minutes to get a little something in the spirit of Hanukkah to have with a cup of tea, and so we met. And we've met over many cups of tea since, but without the mince pies. We are both now trying to break the habit of sugar and flour. Long may this last, as well as our new friendship. For I have truly found a loyal, supportive friend in my editor and writing coach. And if that synchronicity is not a sprinkling of angel dust and mince pies, I don't know what is. So that was that bit of the time. There's some angels who are much huger in energy, that they hold an institution. This era is governed by Archangel Michael, who's helping to raise us to the next vibration. It's a huge, magnificent energy. My angel, when I contacted her finally, and she told me her name, when I listened to her, that was the Celestial Bell, I started laughing. And she said, well, it's a very common name amongst angels. And I looked it up, and there is a mountain called Celestial Bell in China. I had no idea. And people make wind chimes called celestial bells. So it kind of fitted. But she was just, I was like, ha, ha, ha. She was quite stern with me over it. The other thing I have with it is I think that because we are so limited in our language, although we try and be articulate, that when we try and make them into hierarchies, and I do think they do go into, that they do have realms and we can order them for our own information, I'm not sure how accurate it is. Because it's just like that feeling that you might have if you hear some amazing classical music, or you go somewhere, how do you put it into words? It is so hard. Yeah, and whenever here, if I'm channeling and working here, if any musicians come, we can't stop laughing. It almost becomes impossible to channel and get any messages because I start giggling, they start giggling, and the angel becomes very present because of the music. It gets high when it goes up, and that's where the veil between the worlds meets, I think. And I think on Midsummer's Day, when the energy gets really wild, it's where the veil lifts, because in some ways it's hard to integrate having spirituality in your day, because we're meant to be human beings having a human experience. And like, for example, in Egypt, the priests could see people who had died, but we don't want to see people who had died all the time because it drives you crazy. It's enough sometimes seeing people who are alive. No, it's a joke. I love people. I love people, but no. But some people we might not want to see, but no, it's yeah. So it's the balance of it and using the intuition and the instinct. Does that answer your question well enough? Yeah? Yeah, okay. So the book was a journey where I was trying to... I didn't know why I was walking, and I wasn't at ease on Earth, really. I was kind of quite itchy, scratchy, wondering who I was, what I was, and what was I doing writing about angels, and why wasn't I still being a consultant? I was kind of quite discontented with it. And what happened was I came to a talk here, and there was a woman, an author called Claire Dunn, and she's written about Jung. And she was talking about the integration of the masculine and feminine. That Jung talks about the animus and the animi, and the masculine and feminine within us. And I began to realise that through expressing myself and being creative and being self-sufficient, that I started to integrate the masculine so that I could more or less stand on my own 2 feet without needing another partner. Because I'd come out of a long marriage. I was 29 years in a marriage, and the marriage had finished. And so suddenly I was kind of a bit wonky without this person who'd been the masculine part. healed a lot for me when I heard this snatch of conversation, because it made me, I started to apply it to the world as a whole, and it made me realize that in some ways, unless we all integrate the masculine and feminine, we would continue to exploit the earth. Because if I was a woman, I dissolve my power and expect a man to look after me, that encourages him to maybe gather more than he needs, and to, to stockpile, really, to make sure I'm looked after. Whereas if I can be self-sufficient and stand on my own feet, and in more of a supportive way, there would be a balance. And so that was very important for me. And then to have the courage to be able to behave in more of an assertive way rather than a passive way, and to state my needs and be more authentic rather than just be, well, let me just listen, let me assist you in achieving your goals. There's suddenly this, for me, to actually achieve my goals and actually finish a project. Let's face it, that's the miracle. No, it's a joke. But yeah, does that answer it?
Yeah, and I just
Yes, they are. I think you're right.
a bit more balance.
Yeah, yeah,
It's feminine and masculine.
yeah, yeah. And I went to a talk. I went to a course, and in the course, although it's confidential, you're meant to go into a course and you sign a thing of confidentiality. So forgive me for it. I'm not going to be. It was an awakening of love course, and the men who were in that room who were crying. It was a lot of men in tears, openly crying, and it really touched my heart, because how often do we allow men the privilege of being able to cry? And how terrible that they can't, but we can. I mean, those tears, the healing, being able to cry is a healing thing. It doesn't just belong to women. If something happens, men can cry. And suddenly I was in a room with men crying, and I thought about the whole thing of Jung and what he had said. I felt it was very interesting, and I was pleased. It healed something in me. I write it down. I say, "Dear CB, what's going on?" And what she'll say to me is, "Have faith. Lack of faith is your downfall," quite often. So I write it. But you can connect it into your heart, or you can do a meditation, or if you look at a candle, or if you make a prayer. A prayer is a good way, whichever prayer you make. Yeah. And really what it's doing is bringing you back to source, so you feel in alignment. And you're not kind of feeling jagged, yeah, without any doubt. And all the physicists, lots of physicists who are, I used to know at university, I used to meet these physicists, and they were most rational, mathematic people, and they all ended up being religious because of the beauty and because they worked on intuition. And I know Einstein would say that intuition is key, and it is. It's that whole thing, that aha moment. And it's having the right for us as humans to recognise that we are divine, and that if we are writers, we should be doing it, or if we are musicians, we should. And we can, and not to let anyone... Yes, yeah, and that's the balance, yeah.